What's up, guys? So I was sitting around thinking, and I thought, I hadn't really talked about how I got into car audio, and there's something that means more to me than just stereo system in a car. A lot of people look at car audio as just another accessory, set of wheels, big stereo, tinted windows. But for me, it's something entirely different. So, as a youngster now, my car audio experience actually started before I even got a car uh, because of just what it means to me. I was a recluse as a kid. Um, I didn't hang around with a lot of big groups. I didn't go, clubs, games, sports activities, things. I pretty much stayed to myself. I had one friend, and usually, and that's about it. And it would be me and him, or actually me and her. I had some female friends that were legit friends, and we would, it would just be the two of us or me. I didn't like big groups, never did. So that also applied whenever I was at home. I would go to my room and I would just sort of close the door and hibernate in there, like most youngsters do, I guess. But I found my solace in listening to music and creating music, and I played the guitar and played drums and played keyboard and I sang and I recorded myself and I did all these sorts of things. I played with audio very, very early in my life. It was a very important part of who I was. Um, and that's never changed. Music was always been a big deal for me. Well, and I think around 1983 or 1984, I was trying to remember exactly, and I'm pretty sure it was in that general area. I think it was just before the Jump album came out, Thriller and Jump, and several big, big albums hit around that time. Uh, my stepdad had gotten this car. It was a 1978 Subaru DL wagon, the red one. And he got it relatively cheap and drove it back and forth to Memphis. It was a long round trip to work for several years, and then he ended up getting another vehicle. And instead of selling that vehicle, he gave it to me. Now, it didn't run, mind you. I didn't know what was wrong with it at the time, but it was actually a starter solenoid. It was a really simple fix. But the car sat behind the house for a very long time. And I'd go out there and mess with it. It was kind of like an extension to my own personal space. So there was obviously no real power, and it had a battery. The battery was pretty much a complete waste of time, but it had one. And I ran an extension cord out there, and I had this electric train set that I had when I was a kid, and I still had the charger, the thing that would make the train go, that energized the tracks. It's just a little uh, AC to DC converter, and it had a variable speed slider, and it had positive and negative, so you could flip the switch and make the train go backwards. What the thing was, though, to me, at this early age, I figured out that it was a power supply. I could adjust that throttle up to the point where it was putting out, somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 14 volts. I had to guess, um, but I got it close. I had a crappy voltmeter, a really bad voltmeter, so I was getting it in the ballpark. And I had the polarity figured out, so I hooked that thing up to the car's electrical system. This enabled me to play the car radio. I don't have to tell you guys, this was a game changer. So now I could kick back in the car, which had manual windows. I could roll the windows up in there. I could kick back and relax in my own private space Nobody could mess with me. I was all by myself and listened to music. And that magical thing, before the car ever moved an inch under my foot, that magical experience was the beginning of my car audio life. And the car had typical, crappy speakers in there, and they were crappy when they were new, and they were certainly not new anymore. And so I immediately, of course, started replacing those with speakers I got out of other things. Living out in the country, this is pre-internet, pre-ordering anything. And there wasn't really a lot of car audio to be had. I mean, you could buy a tape player for your AM FM radio replacement. You could buy some factory replacement speakers at that time. And I think there was even maybe the beginning of an equalizer power booster. But it was just, there was literally hardly anything you could buy for a car. It was all pretty much factory stuff with a slight tweak. Like anything you could get with a premium package in a car, you could buy it aftermarket and put it in there. So if there was a possibility of buying a car with a CD player, but it was stupid expensive, you could go buy a CD player and put it in a car yourself. That was the extent of the car audio world. There didn't even exist subwoofers for cars. That was not even a thing. So what's a car audio junkie that's like 14 years old, has no money, lives out in the middle of the country? What's that guy to do? I mean, I needed a bass, right? So I shopped everywhere. Friends, whenever something broke, uh, someone's stereo broke, a broken TV, anything that might have a speaker in it, that shit was mine, right? That was mine. I got it. And I took it home. And I stashed it and stocked up. I tried experimentations. I took old stuff apart. Everybody's junk was my treasures. I found big speakers, large speakers, which are my favorite, of course. I figured out real quick that those made the most space. And I get the real, you remember Marantz and Kenwood and Pioneer back in the 80s had the big tower speakers, the big rack stereo systems at Walmart. Okay, you remember the really cheap, crappy version that you could buy that looked kind of like that, but it was complete junk? That's what I had. So, yeah, I had the thing that had the big fake looking speaker in it with a little tiny like 6-inch speaker in the middle of it, and looked like it had this. And then it had no tweeter. It was just one speaker, and it had the fake looking tweeter and the little fake flashy stuff on it. Yeah, I got a lot of that kind of stuff. Cheap, cheap, cheap stuff. Cheap stuff. But whenever you're dealing with a stereo running off of a device made to power an electric train, you don't have a ton of amperage. So there's not a lot of watts. So those really inexpensive low power speakers worked quite well in that setup. And I would take one of those big old stereo speakers and I put that sucker back there in the back to get the bass. That's where I did now. That's the cool part. Even back then, when there was no there was no recipe, right? There was no one to look at. There was no vehicle to copy. I had never seen anything done like this. The logical thing to do was to take the big speaker and put it in the back. I had a wagon after all, right? It was a little wagon, a little Subaru wagon. And it was only front wheel drive, by the way. It wasn't 4-wheel drive. That sucked, but that's for another story. So I put that sucker back there in the back and I messed with turning it different directions because I noticed that when I turned it toward the tailgate, the bass was louder. But when I turned it toward me, it was a little clearer. And that interested me. So I kept playing with that concept. And then I got some random pieces of plywood and I started building my own boxes and putting these speakers that I found in them. So before I was old enough to drive, um, before I was old enough to legally drive, because I drove quite a bit, I had already been building subwoofer enclosures with zero input. I mean, this was all coming out of my head. I was piecing together ideas and discovering things without anybody to give me any insight whatsoever as to what the hell I was doing. I didn't have any kin folks that had any audio experience or even a care about what I was doing. I did have an uncle that owned a TV repair shop, though. That was key because I would go up there and work for him, and he'd take me up there to work with him. And the best days of my life, let me tell you. So my job there was to take the old TVs that he'd gotten in that were broken, people had donated or whatever, or they brought in to repair and the repairs were too expensive and they didn't want to repair it, so they just left it. Take shit like that, and I would break it down and I'd put all the chassis on the shelf, labeling everything, bagging things, um, discharge the capacitor and drain that, bust a picture tube and throw that away, save the guns and the chassis. He didn't care about the speakers though. So I got to keep the speakers. Funny thing about those things, they're all low power and they're pretty tough. Those old console TV speakers. So I had a bunch of those. And you could also get them, sometimes you can get lucky and get 6x9 or even like 10-inch round versions of them. I was having a ball with these things. I had replaced the the speakers that were, I think they were in the dash. I don't remember if they were in the door or the dash or what, but I'd replaced the front speakers with TV speakers. I had created a subwoofer box back there. I hadn't done anything with ports. I had no idea that that was even a possibility. Um, Not yet. Okay. So I had built a big box and it was crap, but it sounded fine for what I was doing. I had nothing to compare it to. So that's kind of weird how that works. Even the old grainy TVs back then were amazing whenever they had a VCR plugged into them. We thought that picture was amazing. And now you compare it to what we have now and it looks like hot garbage. Well, having this speaker back there that I had made, which to me sounded amazing because it had bass. And bass was, bass. Bass is always good. And I had the speakers up there in the dash rocking out. I randomly got a hold of, I had gotten a hold of a aftermarket radio. The one that was in the car was actually an aftermarket radio, and it was a cassette player. I don't remember who made it, but it was a real piece of junk. But I got a hold of another piece of junk that was slightly better. It had buttons. Instead of just having the knobs on each side, this thing had buttons, which means it was better. It had a little digital display too, I don't remember, it showed numbers on it or something. I remember that. It's been a long time ago. Um, but the point is, I could sit out there and listen to cassette tapes, which is what was going on at the time, and lean back in that seat and listen to those tapes and let my brain you know, just chill and zone out. And I was doing this as at 14, 15 years old. I never really got into drugs. I never did. I just, I lived out in the country. I mean, I picked up smoking, But that was the only real habit I ever latched onto. Um, I just wasn't in the scene for that. So, and everyone thought I was on drugs all the time. Everybody accused me of being on drugs. I never got into drugs at all. I was, and I didn't mean I was a good kid because I definitely got into a lot of trouble, but none of it was drug related. Um, but I found my solace and my happiness and my center sitting in the vehicle listening to music. I could do it for hours and hours. And that has not changed. All these years later, you know, over um, time that I spent building sub enclosures for people during the 90s and putting in car stereos during the 80s. I was doing that for people. I was putting in, if somebody needed some stuff done, I was on top of that. I was the guy. And back then, about the biggest upgrade you could do would be putting a new pair of 6x9s in the back dash and maybe adding some little speaker pods up in the front somewhere or in a pickup truck. You know, in the 80s, it was you could put some little wedges back there to add some sound in the back. In the early 90s and mid 90s, I got to building speaker enclosures for pickup trucks, for single cab trucks, because you couldn't hardly get anything that sounded worth crap. I mean, all you could find was the wedge boxes with the tweeters in the top of them, and they were complete garbage, total trash. Now, Kicker had come out with the ass kicker. Excuse me, Stillwater Designs had come out with the ass kicker. But that was out of reach of a lot of people, and it wasn't everywhere at that time. It was out, but it wasn't. Not everybody was, hip to that. And the little town that I was working out of was Conway, Arkansas. There really wasn't anything there for people to go buy, you know. So word got out that I built decent boxes for standard, single cab pickup trucks. I mean, I couldn't find time to do anything else. There's people just I had to turn people away all the time because I was just too busy to be able to do anything. I was working at this gas station, and that's where I picked up my first dude, and I built the box for him, and his friend saw it, and I had all of them beating them because every one of them drove a pickup truck. All these guys drove these trucks, and they were all single cab trucks, and they all couldn't find stuff to fit in there, and they all wanted loud bass. And so they knew a guy, and that's the guy they came to. There was no other person anywhere around that was doing what I did. I was the source. Um, Granted, I wasn't as good as I've never been good at it, but I did create a functional thing that did a functional job, and it looked pretty damn good in the end. Um, and so I was the guy. None of these guys, they were all farm kids. They all, they had their daddy's money and they're working on the farm and stuff. They had no clue how to build a speaker box. And, I mean, here I am in my 20s and I got 10 years of experience. How does that even happen, man? Um, but yeah, so we did that, we did that up until I guess it was the late 90s. And then I got to working for fast food and I spent years in fast food management for Wendy's and Pizza Hut and Taco Bell, mostly Wendy's. I worked at Wendy's for a long time as manager for a long time. Um, and then that's kind of how my life has progressed on forward. I didn't really have much going on. I had some cool systems during that time because I was making manager money, which isn't terribly bad, but it is what it is. Um, had one of the cooler systems, which was a set of JL W3s and a sealed enclosure, 15 W3s, and a sealed hatchback box and a extended cab Chevy S10. That was a 2000, I believe it was a 2000 or 2001. 2000, I think it was. It was right at the turn. My mom passed away about this time, and That wrecked my whole world. I ended up losing that truck and the stereo system that was in it whenever they come to repo the damn thing. She went sideways. Then I met my wife, and everything moved this direction. I got back into this stuff. Um, so car audio has always been my jam. It's always been part of me, and it's not. It's never been because I want to be that guy with the cool stereo. It's never been an add-on to, a checklist item. Big wheels, tires, stereo, exhaust, windows. It's never been that. It's just naturally always there because I've always been there. That's my happy place. I think a lot of people um, that may be watching this ridiculous video um, probably are also in that place. So if you are one of those people who find yourself sitting in a car in a parking lot for 2 or 3 hours at a time, watching videos or listening to music after work instead of going home or instead of going somewhere or whatever, whenever you prioritize sitting in a car to listen to the radio or sitting in a car and watch videos, whenever you prioritize that over something else, it's not make you weird. You're just somebody like me who finds solace and center in that activity. And there's nothing wrong with that. Um, and those types of people usually are into what we call SQ or sound quality car audio. They like that kind of experience. And I am one of those people. I do have a hard lean towards sound quality, but I also have a fun side, kind of like a mullet, business in the front, party in the back. Yeah, like that. So I like to be able to crank the subs up and do stupid shit because that's fun. It's a different place. Okay. I can go both places in my vehicle. So when I build my setup, I build it in such a way that I can easily go to centering and relaxing or just acting like an idiot. Both directions. I want the best that I can get of both worlds. So if you're watching me and what I do and how I do it, and if you want to know the reason that I don't push harder in one direction or the other, now you know. I like to be able to play both sides of that fence because I live on both sides of that fence. Guys, if you hadn't hit that subscribe button by now, go ahead and slam it. This is just one of those videos I thought you might find interesting. How I got into car audio. Anyway, peace.